Welcome to Beers with Brownie. We're an international rugby league YouTube show where we like to bring on people that have done some great things in the international rugby league space, and we like to tell their stories. So if you're new to the channel, guys, we've just reached 1,000 subscribers and we really appreciate all the support. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and please drop a like for this video. So I'd like to welcome our guest for this episode. He's a current journalist at The Raw. He was the former NRL outsider at Forbes Sports and Rochdale native Mike Meehall Wood. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Brownie. I'm Rochdale's second most prominent rugby league journalist, although Gareth Walker is now retired, so maybe I'm the first.
Nice one. So each episode, we like to support a beer that supports rugby league. So for this episode, we're going with KB Lager. And for those that don't know, KB used to sponsor the midweek competition back in 82 and 83 that was also formerly known as the Tooth Cup and the Panasonic Cup. So in 82 and 83 it was the KB Cup. So thank you for supporting rugby league, KB Lager. So welcome to the show again, Mike. Cheers.
Cheers.
So I noticed you've got another beverage there, Mike. Would you like to share with the viewers what beverage that is?
This is Dandelion and Burdock. It was previously known as the Taste of Rugby League. There's a little gap on the can, there used to be a little sign there. My Instagram is dedicated to my love of fizzy pop, and I've got to go to work later, so I thought, I can't really be drinking beer at this time of the day, but I will drink lovely D&B. I don't really know what their relationship was. The company that makes it, Bar, they make Iron Brew, the elite fizzy pop of the world.
Right, yeah.
And, they used to sponsor the Sky coverage of it wasn't like the Iron Brew Super League, but when you watch it on Sky, that was like the bumper ad. I'm not sure what Dandelion and Burdock did, but it used to say it on the cans, so I thought, there you go. I'm amazed you can buy it in Australia. It's really good.
Excellent. Well, thank you for D&B for your support of rugby league. Okay, so every episode I like to wear a piece of international rugby league merchandise to show my support. And Mike's all the way from Rochdale, so he's obviously supports England and Great Britain. So I've got my Great Britain rugby league jersey from 2006. And Mike, you've got a fun fact about that?
So the try scorer who scored the last try when England won, the last time England won here in Sydney, later went to prison for smuggling illegal printer cartridges. That's Gareth Rayner.
Wow.
So that's what Gareth Rayner does now. I think he's out of jail now, but I'm not sure. Gareth, if you're watching, do leave it in the comments.
And Mike, I've noticed you've got a, from your hometown, you've got the Rochdale Hornets jersey on. Would you like to tell us about that one?
Yeah, I don't know how long we've got, but this is the Rochdale Hornets ex-Fiji jersey. Rochdale's got the biggest Fijian population outside of London, I think. It's certainly got many, many Fijians in Rochdale. We've had, it dates back to the 1960s when players came over from Fiji. The first team to have any Fijian players in England professionally was Rochdale.
Yep.
And there's a big Fijian community to this day. Like I used to play in the touch footy league with two teams, entirely made up of Fijians, and that was 10 years ago. Rochdale Hornets still got Fijian players now, players in the amateur competition, stuff like that.
Yep.
So this year, on the death of one of the original Fijians, they produced this commemorative jersey, which supports like Fijian causes. It's got the Sivnasiva Foundation on the side. And this is so when Rochdale Hornets, they've still got the kit that they play in, but this is like their training top. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only one in the Southern Hemisphere, so there you go.
Well,
unless there's one in Fiji, which I guess is in the Southern Hemisphere. I hope there is.
Well, to the Rochdale Hornets Club, I'll make it too. So a bit of history. My father was a Fijian that joined the British Army at the same time with Joe Lavula, who played at Rochdale Hornets. They were in the same regiment and they were good friends. So my dad actually has a soft spot for the Rochdale Hornets, so there's a fun fact for you.
Yeah, it's quite strange that the Fijian is wearing the Great Britain top and the person from Great Britain is wearing the Fiji top, but there you go.
So Mike, you've been involved in rugby league pretty much your whole life, so how did your love of rugby league where did it come from?
It came, firstly from my dad, who's, he played in a lot of the amateur competitions through the 80s and 90s. I think my first game was Rochdale Hornets against Carlisle in about 1994. I can remember my first training session in a park in Oldham before I was old enough to play in the under 7s or under 6s or whatever it was. So yeah, it's always been there. Both my mum and my dad were involved. My mum's actually from Ireland, so she didn't grow up with rugby league at all, but from a big sporting family of people who are into Gaelic football and other sports like that. But then she sort of got forced into it with my dad, so she did some work with the GB women's team in the 90s. My dad was involved with student rugby league as a coach at lots of different levels, so he was a development coach in Oldham, a PE teacher in St Helens, so you can imagine some of the talent that he's seen go through.
Oh, absolutely.
Over the years, yeah. And I did my junior rugby league at Royton Tigers, which is in Oldham, it's a junior club that produced Danny and Paul Sculthorpe, most famously. Chris Bridge, he played for Ireland and Warrington, was one of our juniors as well.
Yep.
Very much behind the Oldham, St Anne's and Waterhead and Saddleworth of the Oldham scene, but we were a pretty good team.
Yep.
And I played for Rochdale for my town as well for a couple of years, so I managed to play against, I'm trying to think who's good now that I played against. Sam Burgess, Sam Tompkins.
Wow.
Kyle Eastman, who played for England, he was the best player I ever played against. Yep. I played standoff as a kid and he played standoff at our rival school, town and club. So every game I went into, I was playing against this kid who went on to play for England. So usually came off second best to Kyle, but yeah.
Well, no shame in that.
No, not at all. Yeah, he was bloody good.
So Mike, you played, you've told us about a bit about your playing background. You had a spell over in the Netherlands rugby league competition playing for the Amsterdam Cobras. So how did that all come about?
Yeah, so I think I quit playing rugby league at about 14 or 15 to take up Gaelic football, because that was basically everybody else was getting bigger and I wasn't. I'm roughly the same size now that I was then. But yeah, I moved to the Netherlands in 2019, started 2019, and I saw that they had a rugby league club, and so I actually turned up to a training session thinking that I wasn't going to play for the team. I just wanted to sort of see what it was like, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I definitely didn't want to play because I thought I was like 58 kilos. I thought I'm going to get absolutely smashed here. Right. And I remember I picked up a ball and I threw it probably like 20 meters, 25 meters, and the coach was like you have to play. Obviously, a lot of the players are Dutch players who just learning the game, so they're like anybody who could pass the ball accurately was getting a game. Yeah. But yeah, it was great because it was like, physically I was terrible. Like I was the smallest guy in the field most weeks, but you could always... You had
the skill and the footy now.
Yeah, well, I used to think of it as like being a native speaker of rugby league. Like there was a couple of guys in our team who were French or Australian or English who grew up with the game, and you just had to make sure they played certain positions. So we had a Scottish guy playing at hooker, I was playing at 7 or 6s from France. There's another guy who was playing 13 who was from Hull, so we were just like, okay, right, everybody else can fit in around these dudes, Yeah. And it was great because we had lots of guys who, you literally were like coaching them through the game who were just all passion and enthusiasm. Dutch guys who'd never heard or seen a game of rugby league who suddenly loved it. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I'm still in the Cobras WhatsApp chat now. So
excellent.
Yeah, and actually it's weird because this year's Dutch competition was won by Zwolle, but Zwolle is half of our team from Amsterdam. We actually split into two, so I kind of weirdly support Amsterdam's my ride or die, but got a lot of love for the Zwolle boys as well, and a lot of the lads we played with at Den Haag and Rotterdam, lovely guys as well. And there's actually another guy from Rochdale who plays for Den Haag. So. Oh, okay,
fantastic. So, Mike, for those that don't know much about rugby league in the Netherlands, you've experienced it firsthand. How's it all going, and do you still follow it closely?
Yeah, I still follow it. As I say, I'm in the WhatsApp group, so I get to see what's going on, and yeah, they seem to be going all right. I know that because of COVID rules, they didn't get to play for a lot of, for a pretty long time. Like I think there was only a 9s tournament in 2021, but they were getting out and training, stuff like that. And obviously, love a social event, so they were still going on pretty strong. Yeah. And this year, it's been strange, I think, for Amsterdam a little bit because half our guys played for Zwolle, which is not that close to Amsterdam. So it kind of made logical sense for them to split into two teams once they got enough players in Zwolle. When we had 10 guys coming across, they'd be like, why don't you have your own team? Yeah. But obviously weakened the Amsterdam team, so I think we're now not as good. We got to the grand final the year I played. We won it the year before, and now this year we didn't get near the grand final, but Zwolle did win it. So maybe Zwolle they were always the good guys, and we were just making up the numbers.
But I noticed Netherlands are very active on the international stage. Obviously pre-COVID, and now that everything's opened up again, and they've got some games coming up against Germany and Spain, and so some of your ex-teammates might be popping on a national jersey. Do you think? Yeah, well, I don't think. I think a couple of lads who moved to Zwolle, like Laurie Rignac, who's been on Chasing Kangaroos podcast on the podcast version. He's going to play for the Netherlands. Though he's actually born and raised in France. He's a great player. Still annoyed at him. I threw the greatest pass I've ever thrown, proper Harbour Bridge pass, and he dropped it. Oh no! Lying to his mercy, I've never forgiven him for it. I'd still got to bed thinking of that pass. So they've actually been really successful. They won a competition in, I think, Turkey last year. Yeah, the European D comp.
Yeah. So, and the level's pretty good. Like, there's a lot of really good athletes. Like the Dutch are, I think they're the tallest nation in the world. So,
wow.
I think in terms of getting kids who are fit and strong and run around a lot, they're really good. And then it's just a case of raising the technical level. So there's Joran Schoenmaker, who played for us, is just so big and strong and fast, all the physical package you could want, and just need to point them in the right direction. There's a couple of lads who play for the Hague team who are quite a lot like that as well, and just a nice bunch of lads.
Excellent. So Mike, a fun fact, you went to Ireland Rugby League's first ever international. How did that all, tell us about that?
Yeah, I was 6 years old, I think 6 or 5, and it was me and former West Tigers forward Mark Flanagan. If you remember him.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
Many years in the Super League as well, and various siblings, my brothers and his sister. So our dads, Terry Flanagan, who played many years for Oldham, played for Great Britain, and my dad were the coaches of the Ireland team when it was literally basically an amateur team. Although Joe Lydon played in that game, came off the bench at probably the age of about 50, I think, but I don't know how old he was. But he played over in the Washington Redskins, stadium in Washington. So we all went along and and then obviously '95 when you had the World Cup in England, you then had the Emerging Nations World Cup that went alongside it. So Ireland played in that. They lost the final to the Cook Islands, I think, in Bury, which is the town next to Rochdale. Yeah, so my dad was involved in Ireland Rugby League from the start. Although my dad's not Irish, but my mum is, so they were always kind of linked in that and trying to help get the game going over there.
Fantastic.
I'm Ireland's #1 and original fan, so in the World Cup I don't know how impartial I'm going to be. I might have to recuse myself from Ireland games.
So Mike, you're also telling me off camera you did some work for some touring teams as a translator. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, that was, so I was at university in Leeds, and so when I was 19 I moved to France. I did French all through school, did all my family holidays in France. We actually changed where we went when the Catalans got into Super Leagues, so that we could go with the Catalans every year. And then, so I spoke pretty good French. Moved to France, got really good at French, and basically I hadn't been involved in rugby league at all in any way other than, going to Edinburgh and watching LFC and stuff like that, like my local teams. So somebody from York, one of the clubs in York, got in touch and said, "Oh, we heard you speak French. We're going to go over to France in a couple of months. Do you want to come and be our translator, fixer, whatever?" Yeah, and it was good fun. It was almost like, when you got to university, the university I went to, so got a lot of people who are, shall we say, charitably not rugby league people. Yeah. And so you were in this world of, people who went to private schools and stuff like that, who you didn't really feel you had much in common with. So it was quite nice to go and hang around with lads from Rochdale and St Helens and Wigan and all these different places. Yeah. It's a bit like zookeeping when you're supposed to be the responsible person on tour. It was weird because I would be 19 or 20. Everyone else would be older than me, but I'm theoretically the most responsible person there, trying to keep them out of the jail and stuff like that. But yeah, they were all good lads, and even the old fellas, the guys running the tour were in the 50s and 60s, but they were still like lads on tour a little bit. So we did that. I think we did 1 year. We went to Barcelona when Warrington played the Catalans in the Olympic Stadium. Wow! So I think I'm actually the only person, one of the few not French people, Catalan people, who's been to both the games in Barcelona, because I went to the first one against Warrington and the second one against Wigan. You went to Camp Nou? Yeah, that was my 30th birthday party. Oh, fantastic. It's the only game that my missus has ever been to. It's the Catalans and the Nou Camp and Newtown Jets. So. And Henson Park. And Henson Park. She's hipster rugby league. That's it. So, Mike, your dad, Neil Wood, has had an enormous involvement in rugby league throughout a number of years. And he's done a lot in the international rugby league space as well, and in a lot of expansion areas. Can you tell us about what type of work he's done? Yeah, so for most of my childhood growing up, he was a sort of PE teacher, development coach. So he literally used to teach PE in my school, but would also, he used to do all the junior clubs in Oldham, Salford, Rochdale at various different periods. He ran student rugby league. He ran rugby league conference for all the areas that don't play rugby league. And then now he works with the Catalans. He does stuff with International Rugby League. He's one of these people who's just like one of the great evangelists for rugby league. Like, it was impossible as a kid. You couldn't go to any ground without 10 people from whatever local junior club coming up to him and going, "Oh, hi Neil, how you doing?" Everybody knew him. So he's, I used to think of him as like Forrest Gump of rugby league. Like, he was present at all events. He wasn't necessarily taking part, but he was, you want to go, the 1985 Challenge Cup final, I was behind the goal drinking a beer, or 82 Kangaroo Tour, went to like 5 games. I think he went to the game when Wally Lewis played for Wakefield, just because Wally Lewis was playing. Pretty sure he did that.
Okay. Well, last time I saw your dad was the morning of the Challenge Cup final when the Catalan Dragons won a few years back. I think it's 2018 or thereabouts, and had a coffee with him and Taz Materi that morning because Taz's son was playing in the game, and you were telling me when Catalan won, he was the happiest man alive, right?
He was. He lost the run of himself. So we all, pretty much straight after you saw him, he came to meet us in the pub in London somewhere, Euston, I think, and we just get on the drink. And so when the Catalans won, we were right in the block of all the Catalans fans. We had like flags and scarves, stuff like that. And we all went back out after the game. We saw Steve Mascord on the steps of Wembley. Sort of fell into him, I was so hammered. And we ended up going to this French restaurant. My dad, we were sat in the pub like we need to eat something, but we were so drunk. And he was like, we're going to get French food. We're getting French food. And so...
Stay in theme.
Yeah, we've got to stay in theme. Anyway, so we clearly put it into his phone, like French restaurants near me. But because we were in central London, it was like a really posh, fancy place. And I was like, you might do it, but I'm not paying for it, mate. You're not getting a penny out of me. And so he was there, like, buying all this stuff. And then, I think the next day when he saw the bill, he wasn't as pleased with it. I think he wished he'd gone for a crepe rather than whatever he got.
So, Mike, just moving over to your journalism side, I remember reading some great rugby league articles when you were the NRL outsider at Forbes, giving rugby league some great exposure through the Forbes social media channels. How did you get that? Like, how did that role come about?
So I was living in Berlin, and I started working for them as a soccer journalist through doing sports business and stuff like that. And then gradually, basically, as they sort of said, the idea was that you could kind of cultivate your own audience and try and find whatever niche that you were a quote-unquote expert on.
Yep.
And so, obviously, for me, that was always going to be rugby league. Like, I wrote a lot about Scottish football, which is kind of my other passion,
yep.
Glasgow Celtic, which got loads of traffic. So I thought, well, there's actually quite a lot of pay dirt in this. If you write stuff that's good and very focused and stuff that you know about. So I started writing about rugby league and did a lot of stuff. Obviously, at the time, being based in Europe, I was focused on Super League. And then when I came here, I had to think of something that was a little bit different from what I'd been doing, because I was going to watch the NRL, and I thought, well, there's 100 people who know more about the NRL than me, well, 100,000 probably. So I thought, what can I bring for the Forbes audience that's a lot more business first, and said, okay, well, why is this like it is? Yeah, and people seem to like it. I remember coming here to watch Newtown and writing a story about Newtown in North and how this was a different angle on what rugby league could be, like a more bespoke product. Yep. Vinyl record rugby league, I think I called it.
Okay.
And a lot of people like that idea of sort of trying to segmentize your market. I mean, I've been working in marketing. When I was a freelance journalist, I was working half in marketing and then half as a journalist.
Yep.
So I knew a lot to think I knew a little bit about it and how to market stuff. So I was trying to apply that mindset to, rugby league's very, we've always done this like this, therefore we will continue to do it like this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in Super League and even more of it, I think, in Australia. So yeah, I think that resonated with a lot of people, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Now, I just remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did an article about Tonga in the 2017 World Cup?
Oh no, I did one it was about private equity. It was about selling the game to, there was talk about private equity coming into Super League, which has subsequently happened. And I sort of thought, well, what they should actually invest in is the international game, because usually when private equity buys a sports league, they need to, obviously they want to make money, right? So they think, let's make more better fixtures. But usually first it's more fixtures. That's certainly what happened with Rugby Union, Formula One, stuff like that.
Yep.
And I thought, well, if there's one area of rugby league in which money definitely would talk and in which definitely needs more fixtures,
yep,
then that was the international game. So that was kind of the argument I used, the sort of, Tonga playing one game a year or 0 games a year, as was the case,
yep,
would be, you could easily make 3 games out of that, which you'd be able to then sell the rights to. And all it needed was somebody with enough money to make everybody come to the table. Kind of what happened in Super League in 1996 in England or 95 in England.
Yeah. Well, Mike, just keep staying on the journalism theme. You've now been recruited to the Raw, and you're covering. You're now an NRL journalist. So how's that all been? How's the experience?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I had to abandon the NRL Outsider hashtag brand when I worked in it every single day, which which I was going to do anyway, to be honest. But you know, you've got to create a brand in this world about what it is that you do as a person, particularly as a journalist. You know, you've got to have a USP. So yeah, I think what's really empowered me working this year is that I get to write about stats and tactics, which is what I was always interested in, like on the field stuff. So when I worked for Forbes, you obviously, a lot of the time you write to the audience of the publication that you work for.
Yeah.
So when I worked for Forbes, obviously business and finance and that sort of thing was kind of there. You know, that's what people went to Forbes for. Whereas the Raw, you can be a lot more analytical. It's a lot of opinion stuff, features, stuff like that. So I'm very happy to be able to write to stats and tactics and present a different voice to, I think, what a lot of people in the rugby league media do, which, yeah, seems to be going, people seem to like it.
Yeah, no.
I hope they do anyway. Justifies me spending a lot of time on trains and eating party pies in stadiums. So.
Well, just a fun question. Who does the, which NRL club do the best catering?
Oh, that's a good question. So prior to me working for the Raw, I was doing #footy in food, where, because you, in this job, you end up going to loads of different parts of Sydney with loads of different restaurants. So I usually go for food beforehand, because, you know, if you're going to if you're going to Campbelltown, you can go through Cabramatta on the train and get Vietnamese food.
Yeah.
Or up here, we're in North Sydney Bears, there's a really good vegetarian Indian restaurant just behind there. There's another one in Parramatta Stadium, actually, from the same chain. There was also one in Amsterdam that I was a big fan of. If you're going to Cogra, then you can go to Hurstville, get Chinese food.
Yeah.
Harris Park is near Parramatta Stadium as well, good Indian food. So I've been trying to do that. I don't know, that's a good question. A lot of it's very generic. There's one of my colleagues, a big fan of the arancini balls you get at Parramatta. But yeah, that's a good question. Manly's pretty good. Sometimes you get like fish and chips at Manly. Oh no, KFC at Penrith. Penrith do a KFC. That's
West Tigers are sponsored by KFC. Do they do KFC?
No, they don't. But KFC in Manlyville was a favourite of mine. You know, I hit all high and low culture.
I've been there many a time.
But yeah, the KFC at Penrith is famous. Way too much of it though. Because I think there's a KFC like 5 minutes from Pampa Stadium, so they just bring in an order and fire it across.
So Mike, I'm going to ask another NRL question before we move on to some international rugby league questions. So Mike, hypothetically speaking, you're the CEO of the NRL. Where do you put the 18th franchise?
I think I got to put the Forbes hat back on and say where's got the best business case, which to me has got to be New Zealand, because you've got an extra time zone, 1 o'clock Sunday, for example, or that 6 p.m. Friday game, which is the worst game of the week, usually in the NRL, would be 8 p.m. New Zealand. It should be a New Zealand team every single week. In the same way that the Broncos almost always play on a Thursday or Friday night, or Saturday night. That should always be a New Zealand team for the time zone. So I think, I'm not sure, I'm not a New Zealand expert enough to say where else should be. I think Christchurch probably, based on their stadium being called Rugby League Park, which I like. But I think North South Island maybe. There's a lot of players historically have come from the South Island as well, in terms of, especially on the, tries to get his geography right, the West Coast, Greymouth kind of area, where Griffin Neame's from. He's historically produced a lot of rugby league players in the past. But yeah, I think the second New Zealand team is the most obvious place for it. Beyond that, I mean, yeah, Perth would be, again, an obvious place to put a team. I think if you were going to go to 20, the next one after that would be Perth, and I don't know, Adelaide probably. But yeah, it's got to be New Zealand.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So 18th comes in, let's say Christchurch. Where's 19th and 20th? So you're saying Perth and...
Yeah, I think Perth, there is a case for having, again, that time zone thing. Different time zones to everybody else, and the ability to, you know, there's only 2 professional sport, well 3 including the soccer team, professional sports teams in Perth. So it's possible, I think, to find a niche for the rugby people, because the rugby union team doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, beyond that, I don't know how PNG would work in terms of where players are going to live, where they're going to be based. I don't know enough about it. I like the idea of it, but I think the Hunters system that exists in the Q Cup is probably about right. I'd love to see something similar with Tonga and Samoa to what we have here in New South Wales with the Silktails, the Fijian team. So yeah, maybe, I don't know. Adelaide is always the famous one because it used to exist in the past, you know, but bring back the Steelers maybe, I don't know. Where are the Bears? Yeah, the West. We're in North Sydney. Go for the Bears. Get the Bears back in. I don't like the Bears in here. This is like a heritage venue. But yeah, the Bears based in Perth. 1-2 games a year here. Sounds great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Mike, just a
before they run me out of town for not saying the best. Rochdale Hornets, bring them over.
Well, just a quick personal story. Like I'd never been to the South Island of New Zealand until 2019, and I decided to go over when Great Britain were playing New Zealand. Fiji played Papua New Guinea in Christchurch. That was the curtain raiser game. So I have a cousin in Christchurch, so I decided to go over, and I was pleasantly surprised how big rugby league is down there. Like you say, Rugby League Park, and there was a massive mural of David Kidwell in Christchurch. So he must be a Christchurch local. Yeah, a big mural on this building of David Kidwell. So yeah, I tend to agree with you there. The 18th team, New Zealand has got a lot of merit. But as for further teams, I think Perth's got to be a no-brainer. And there's a big fan of the show, Guy, who lives in Adelaide, and he's a massive advocate of bringing an Adelaide team back. So wouldn't that be great if next three teams were Christchurch, Perth, and Adelaide?
Yeah, I mean the New Zealand one as well. It makes total sense. Like what we've seen in Super League when expansion has worked well, it's because I think it's the Volandis phrase, "fish where the fish are."
Yeah.
But it's not like bringing the game to somewhere where it didn't exist previously. It's more about getting the places that already have pathways, and like there's clearly lots of players who come out of New Zealand who've moved to Sydney because they have to play. And you think, well, if you could actually just keep those players in New Zealand and keep that talent pathway going, it would only get bigger. Because if you're, nowhere produces more rugby players of either coat than New Zealand does per capita.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, Mike. So before international rugby league questions, let me ask one more NRL question. Now that you're immersed in NRL journalism, so the NRLW is now, like we've seen, it's a massive success, and it's getting so many women involved in the game. More young girls want to play rugby league now. So we've got 6 teams for this season. We're going to 10. So we've got Sharks, Tigers, Raiders, and Cowboys coming in. How do you expand from there?
I think you keep it as it is. Like I know Mary Constantopoulos, who works with us at Chasing Kangaroos and at the Raw, is a big advocate of you've got to pay the players to be there for one, and you also, one of the failures of the AFLW has been expanding and sort of recreating the problems of the AFL in AFLW. Yeah. So I don't see why you would recreate the problems of the NRL and the NRLW. There's already too many teams in Sydney. Like I'm very much keep it as it is in terms of men's teams in Sydney because that's what we have now. But why you would then go, okay, well, let's give everybody a team when you could say, actually, I don't think we need to have, a Manly and, all the different teams that don't. But then on the other hand, I kind of think, well, the reason that West Tigers get a team is because they've been historically so strong in the women's pathway, same with Cronulla. And it's quite hard to make an argument against bringing the teams who've consistently produced women's players into the competition. So then I look at the Panthers and go, the Panthers have got a whole women's league out there. Surely that can feed into a successful team. I think a lot of the Cowboys is a no-brainer because I know there's players who are from North Queensland who've been playing out of, I think Romy Teitzel played out of Newcastle this year, who's from North Queensland. Obviously, if it was entirely at all possible on a feasibility level to bring the Warriors team back in, I think that would help quite a lot.
100%.
It's hard. I love the NRLW, I love going to watch it. I love watching the Women's Super League when I was back home as well. I used to do a bit of work with Bradford Bulls, who at the time were the best team in the Women's Super League, not anymore. Bradford were the men's team were going down the toilet, but the women's team were the best thing about the club. So it was such a positive environment to work in. And I really enjoy it, and I enjoy, obviously, in the summer watching the women's cricket and stuff like that as well. So I really hope that we can keep doing it. And my worry is that it's been going so well here that we're going to end up with a situation like in women's cricket where the Australian team got so good that they didn't lose a game for 50 games in a row. And I wonder if the Super League women will be able to keep up in the same way, just because of they've created the problem that exists that I would like the NRLW not to have, in which there's 3 good players on every team rather than 4 teams with much more good players playing against each other. So you end up with St Helens would have 5 England players, and Leeds would have 5 England players, and then York have got 2, and then they're putting 100 points on other teams.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, so moving on to some international rugby league questions, Mike. I'd love to pick your footy brain on these questions. So every year England seem to play the combined nations in the mid-season test in the Northern Hemisphere. Do you think this is a good idea, or would you prefer them to play France?
They should play France. Every time they should play France. Because France is a proper nation with a proper Rugby League culture, full of Super League players now. Their entire team's picked out of Super League, so I don't see why they can't play France, and France would get better for it. England would get a better game, a more intense game against a team who didn't meet 2 days ago. So yeah, it is baffling to me that they play a ragtag bunch of exiled players. Like, it was stupid when they played the Exiles 10 years ago, it's still stupid now. They should play France. Or Wales, or Ireland, or Scotland, or literally anybody other than who they currently play, but specifically France. And it should be in France. Every year they should play it in France in June. Great weather, great trip for all the England fans.
So Mike, being half English and half Irish, we've just recently heard the news that Victor Radley will play for England at the World Cup due to his father being from Sheffield, and Luke Keary's come out to declare his allegiance to Ireland. So, as a fan of the international game, I'm really excited about that news. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for Luke Keary to declare for us. I was there on Thursday when he said it, so I was very much waiting around in the sheds for my interview was to get Luke Keary to talk about Ireland. I was not the only one who wanted that story, so yeah, good to get it out of him that he was actually going to play. And I think it's crucial for us because teams from the tier 2 nations often struggle in halfbacks. So actually having like a proper top level halfback, along with Richie Myler, who plays there every week for Leeds, who's and played a million games in Super League, is going to make such a big difference. If we remember the Fiji Pacific test that they lost to PNG, I think 1-17 Fiji are better, but 6 and 7 were far worse. So having those guys who play every week is such a big difference. Fiji, I think, went in with Kevin Ngama and a guy who plays for the Massey Cup for West Magpies.
Right.
So yeah, there's a big difference in who steers the team around. So I think he's a great get for Ireland because we have really good forwards. We have pretty decent backs.
And McLaurin will play Hooker, do you think?
I think he'll play for England. I think McLaurin will, because Sean Wayne loves him. He picked him for the mid-season test. I think he might play for England, but if he plays for Ireland, he's played for us many times and he's been very, very good. Such an aggressive player that really sets the tone. So a big fan of him. His work, he's calmed down over the years. Yeah. He used to be great for a impromptu punch-up, but that's quite on brand for Ireland. Having watched them more games than most people, that was usually one of our better aspects. I remember when we lost to Fiji in 2013, we lost the game but won the fight, I think was, but yeah, I think Victor Radley, look, he's from Bondi, so that qualifies you for England these days, and Australia would pick Uarte and Radradra, so they can't really complain. They pick anybody who qualifies for them.
So Mike, let's talk some Rugby League World Cup to wrap it up. Who's going to turn some heads this year?
Well, the underdog story that isn't an underdog story is Samoa. I think Samoa are going to be, everyone says the new Tonga. I think they're the old Samoa. But Samoa are going to be great. I think there's the group that Ireland are in. You get New Zealand will probably be very, very good. I'm not sure if they can be underdogs because they're such a good team. Yeah. But I think Australia could have some issues when they face New Zealand. The way the draw works, we'll likely see those two play in the semi-final, which will be an absolute cracker. I think it's going to be at Wigan. That'll be a big game. Yeah, and I think I did a squads piece about England this week, and I think if they've got very bad depth in the halfbacks, but if they get their first 17 on the field, they'll be better than people think they're going to be. I think the Ireland group, in with New Zealand, you get Ireland, Jamaica, and Lebanon, and I think whoever comes out of that, I think Ireland v Lebanon is going to be a great game. I think the game I'm most excited about, which me and fellow kangaroo chaser Michael Carboni have talked about many times, is Ireland v Jamaica, which is on the first Sunday. Yeah. I think it's going to be in Leeds. I lived in Leeds for years. There's a big Jamaican community, huge Irish community. I think that's just going to be a great event.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I look forward to ditching journalistic impartiality for that one. But yeah, and I think if Ireland can win that, I think the Ireland play Jamaica first, Lebanon second. And so they could be through the group by the time they even face New Zealand. And then you're looking at, anything could happen from there. So I think that's going to be, I think the other group that's got PNG and Tonga in it could be very interesting as well. Yeah, it's just so exciting. Like, there's not every team I'm excited to see. Yeah. I worry a bit for Wales and Scotland. I think they could be fairly cannon foddery, but I spoke to Lachlan Ilias and Peter Mamazelos from Greece. They're super stoked to go out and play and just try and cause some upsets. So I think everybody who goes into the World Cup goes in for their own reasons. Yep. And realistically, I think we've got more teams than ever that can win it. But also, like, if you're Greece or you're Ireland or France or PNG, like, you're going in with your own purposes to do the best that you can do. And in rugby league, that can take you a very long way. So
Mike, we've seen in the past. So 2013 Rugby League World Cup in the UK was a fantastic World Cup, and we didn't see many internationals for the preceding years afterwards. Like I think, let me take that back. We had some Four Nations and whatnot, but how can we capitalise after this World Cup?
Yeah, I think it's a case of playing games here on our time zone in Australia is so important, right? Because whilst the World Cup's great and everyone will watch it because it's the World Cup, it happens at the wrong time of year. So I think it's vital that next year we get everybody out here. We get Fiji playing PNG again, we get Samoa playing Tonga, and we put it in places where there'll be massive interest, put it on TV and make like a little tournament out of it and really capitalise on this side of the world. Because I think people in the UK, broadly speaking, don't need convincing of the necessity of international rugby league because we love it. We've watched it for years. It's the great fallacy. The more England loses, the more interested we are in it. I think it's something in the national character. But yeah, and I think it's vital that Ireland and Wales and Scotland still get to play those games as well. The European Cup format that was existing was really successful, I think. So hopefully they can keep doing that. But yeah, I think it's vital on this side of the world that we get those games to take place that Australia actually bothers to participate in.
Yeah, totally agree, Mike. Just a quick side note was in the 2000 World Cup, England played Ireland and Huddersfield.
I was there. It wasn't in Huddersfield, it was in Leeds.
Was it Leeds, was it?
I was there.
Yeah, I think it was a sellout crowd. It was like Luke Ricketson, Kevin Campion were playing for Ireland, and I just thought, wow, why isn't this an annual fixture? It's fantastic, you know, and it was competitive. I think it was 20 points to 12.
They actually, on the eve of the tournament, I can't remember if it was Open Rugby, it was still then, the big Rugby League magazine, Rugby League World it's called now. They had a picture on the front of it, I think it was Barry McDermott, and it was like our Ireland, like the home nation's best hope of winning. That was a great Ireland team. I think I went to every single one of their games. I was definitely at that one. I actually have a jersey at home that is signed by the entire team. Me and my brother waited in the rain to get the jersey signed by everybody, and I've still got it. It's obviously, it doesn't really fit me anymore because I was 11, but yeah, it's great. It's a lovely little artifact of that time. Actually, the kit that they're wearing at this year's World Cup is a tribute to that one. Yeah. So I'll be definitely picking up. Sponsored by the same Kia Premier, I think. Yeah, so I'm very excited. Like that team, which had McDermott, Terry O'Connor, Martin Crompton, I think played 7. Luke Ricketson obviously was a really good team. I really hope that we can replicate that because Jed Corcoran, who's the coach now, that's what he's talking about, is like the spirit of 2000, of like that group that came together. Although I think in most World Cups that Ireland has played in, we've actually played pretty well because I think it's underrated that obviously when we look at the NRL and we see all the small players at Penrith, for example, and we think of how important that is to their identity, like Irish people are the biggest ethnic minority in the north of England, I think particularly in the northwest. So it's something that we grew up with. If you look at the amateur clubs, you have Dewsbury Celtic and Oldham St Anne's, Wigan St Jude's, Wigan St Patrick's, like these places all grew out of Catholic communities and Irish, which if that part of the world means Irish communities. Yeah. So I think it's underrated the passion and connection to Ireland that these people have because we all speak with my accent. But you know, I played Gaelic football and my school had a Gaelic football team and a rugby league team. Like it's a really deep part of our culture, and I think people underestimate that about when the lads pull on the Ireland jersey, that it does actually mean something to them, and it's not just an excuse to play in the World Cup, which I think it comes across as a little bit with other teams. Unfairly, I would say as well, but I think particularly with Ireland, like we have a tendency to arc up.
Well, Mike,
I've already put myself forward as the culture. Pick me as the 24th man in the squad. I'll teach them all the Rebel songs. It'll be good.
Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. We have to wrap up. But thanks again for your time and some good yarns. So cheers, Mike.